Happy Sunday, good evening. Let's go to the movies. It's so windy. We're seeing Miller's Girl. I don't know what this is really. I don't even know how I heard about this. Jenna Ortega's in it. That's all I know. Let's get into it, I guess. All right, let's talk about it. So that was Miller's Girl, directed by Jade Halle Bartlett, stars Jenna Ortega and Martin Freeman. I liked that, but I don't know if you will. The crux of the story makes sense. It's good. So this young girl, her name is Cairo, 18 years old, lives in some backwoods town of Tennessee. Basically lives by herself. She's isolated. Her parents are traveling wherever, so she has this, little mansion all to herself, and she's a writer. I don't know if it's the beginning of the school year or semester or whatever, but she ends up in Mr. Miller's class. Mr. Miller wrote a book once, a collection of short stories, and it's a creative writing class. At least that's what I think it is. They never exactly say what the class is, if it's like a literature or English class, or if it's a creative writing class. I believe it's creative writing. Cairo, again, 18 years of age, high school student and teacher, Mr. Miller, become involved in a way. All is not what it seems, though. Our sweet little ingenue is not quite the victim. Now, Miss Bartlett, our writer and director, this is her directorial debut. She wrote the script. I would love to know more of her history as a writer, because she writes good prose. I'm just not sure if she writes good script. I'm just wondering at some point if she did write prose, short stories, or even attempt to write a novel at some point. Just coming from a background of having written short stories and then learning how to write screenplays in college, that transition can be very difficult. It's a challenge. Writing screenplays in general, it's not that hard. But if you come from a writing background, there's a lot you have to unlearn, and that can be very difficult, which is why I'm curious as to what her writing background is. Now, I understand she's written, other things like plays, I believe, but I'm wondering if she ever wrote prose, because the way this movie kind of moves and goes about, the dialogue, it reads like prose or poetry. On its face, the execution is ridiculous. It just sounds kind of cringy. Nobody talks like that. It's very unnatural. Very stereotypical. Now, my understanding is that she is from Tennessee, but I don't understand why a lot of people in Hollywood fall into this stereotype of Southern people with these ridiculously thick accents speaking in metaphors. Yes, Southern people have a very interesting way of saying things and making things make sense, but Hollywood tends to go overboard with it. The accents in this movie, very inconsistent. One minute Jenna Ortega had an accent and the next minute she didn't. Very inconsistent and very stereotypical. It just sounded like, a typical lazy Southern accent. I think it would have been a little more believable if I could get a good understanding as to where they're from in Tennessee. But I can't do anything about what I do not know. I can only go off what I do know. And all I know is this is some small little town in Tennessee, but we don't really see much of the town. We see 3 houses and a school. We don't really get a sense for her, or why I should say, her disdain for this small town, other than the voiceover monologue that we get at the beginning where she talks about how she's never really been outside of her town. But we never really see much of the town. What we see is gorgeous. I'm like, give me a good reason as to why you don't want to be here anymore, or why you're better than this place. Because based on what I've seen so far, baby girl, you fit right in. Like, it makes sense that you're here. I believe this is an original screenplay, but if I didn't know any better, I would have thought this was like an adaptation of some cheesy Kindle Unlimited novel. This is the closest thing I've seen to erotica on screen since 50 Shades of Grey. It's not vulgar. There aren't any sex scenes, really. There are some things, but it's steamy. My biggest issues here are the lack of character development. There really isn't any, but this really is a testament to Jenna Ortega's talent, because she works this character very well. She's incredibly talented. Baby girl knows what to do with her face. My gosh. I think we know too much from the beginning. We get a sense of her manipulative nature from the very beginning. I think that was a mistake. Because once we get to kind of the climax of the story, no pun intended, that transition to this Black Widow of a character isn't that shocking. Her behavior, her actions are like, what is wrong with you? But it doesn't feel all that shocking that she has made this change. Does that make sense? I think the intention here, we're supposed to see her as innocent, and then we're supposed to be taken aback by choices that she makes. I wasn't taken aback. I mean, you could kind of see that coming from a mile away. At one point I was asking, like, who am I supposed to be rooting for? Like, who is the protagonist here? Who am I supposed to be, following in this story? Am I supposed to be supporting him, this, has-been of a writer who's trying to inspire students, who's kind of found common ground with this young girl who clearly doesn't understand boundaries or lines? Or am I supposed to be rooting for the young girl who is kind of isolated in her Tennessee house, who has dreams of going to Yale, and is frustrated with the fact that she feels like she hasn't accomplished anything and is looking to accomplish something big? But by the end, I'm like, what is wrong with you? Who am I supposed to be rooting for? Who is this movie for? Like, what is the target audience here? That's the other confusing part. Because who is this for? Is this for people like me, literary and writing nerds, who can appreciate the poetic nature of the dialogue? Like, who is this for? I would classify this as gothic romanticism, but without the aesthetic. It definitely has kind of that vibe, that feel of tragic darkness. It kind of reminded me like an old Shakespearean tragedy. Like, there's no going up. We're only going downhill. This will only end in a bad way. What I do find interesting about this movie, number one, I'm a sucker for like cheesy little metaphors and foreshadowing, right? So we have mentions of spiders, Black Widow spiders being trapped in one's web. And then they keep talking about the kudzu being an invasive species, which kind of sucks the life out of all the surrounding plants. Like, dang, just tell us the ending of the movie, right? But I also like how the director decided we're going to center female sexuality and the power that women have over men, no matter how old they are. There is a moment in the movie, and I really like this, I'm such a nerd, where we see that power dynamic switch. Because, he's the teacher, she's the student, he's the adult, she's the child. And we see those tables turn where now she's in charge and she's running the story and he's at her mercy. The visual way that she did that switch, very basic, old school, film 101. I love it. The movie's not great. It's not perfect. It definitely has issues. But I would love to see this director get more opportunities. She definitely has potential once she finds her groove and once she figures out what to do with dialogue. But Jenna Ortega, she's a special talent. She's incredible. I've talked about it before. Like, I'm rooting for the movie star era to come back. She's on my list. She has the potential to be one of those actors or actresses where you're like, oh, I'm going to go see this movie just because she's in it. It's all right. I want to watch it again, though. It'll probably be on streaming. There's only one showing today, and I don't think it's showing at all next week. Like, this is a very limited release. But I want to watch it again just to, get an extra peek at all the little details.